Have you ever found yourself agreeing to something, maybe buying a product or accepting a deal, and then later you kind of stop and think, wait, why did I say yes to that? It happens to all of us, and believe me, it is not an accident. There are these really powerful psychological triggers that can get us to say yes, a lot of times without us even realizing it. So in this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain and see exactly what those triggers are.
To get our heads around this, we're going to start with a pretty bizarre story from the animal kingdom. So you've got a mother turkey. She is fiercely protective of her chicks. And then you have her number one enemy, a polecat. So what on earth could possibly make her not just tolerate a polecat, but actually pull it in close like it's one of her own?
Well, scientists did this fascinating experiment. They took a stuffed polecat, put a little recorder inside it, and played the cheep cheep sound of baby turkeys. And just like that, the mother turkey's behavior did a complete 180. She gathered this stuffed predator under her wing, all gentle and motherly. But the second they turned that sound off, bam, she attacked it like she meant it. Her maternal instinct wasn't being triggered by what she saw or what she smelled. It all came down to a single sound.
Now, this kind of automatic, almost mechanical behavior, it's not just some weird quirk that turkeys have. It actually has a really powerful parallel in our own minds, a response that can be triggered just as easily.
The fancy scientific name for this is fixed action patterns, but I love the analogy from the book Influence. Think of them like old-school cassette tapes in our heads. A very specific trigger, that's the click, hits the play button. And then, whir, this whole standard sequence of behaviors just rolls out automatically. For the turkey, cheep cheep is the click, and her mothering behavior is the whir.
Okay, so this is interesting, but what does it have to do with us? Well, it turns out we humans have our own cheep cheep sounds. We have these pre-programmed mental shortcuts that help us get through the day without having to analyze every single decision. But what happens when someone else figures out how to push those buttons for us?
You know, these shortcuts are usually our friends. They're like a form of mental jujitsu. They help us operate efficiently and save our brain power for the big stuff. The problem is, they also leave us vulnerable. People who know what they're doing, salespeople, marketers, negotiators, can use these principles as weapons, triggering our automatic whir response to get what they want.
All right, so let's dig into the first of these weapons. It's called the contrast principle, and it plays on a really simple quirk of our brains. How we see things depends almost entirely on what we saw right before it. Here's a classic example of how retailers use this all the time. If you walk into a store to buy a suit and a sweater, a good salesperson will always try to sell you the expensive suit first. Why? Because after your brain is anchored on that $495 price tag, a $95 sweater suddenly seems, well, cheap. It's not a big deal. But if they tried to sell you the sweater first, that $95 would feel like a lot more money.
You can actually feel this yourself. It's wild. Just take one hand and put it in a bucket of cold water, and the other hand in a bucket of hot water. Keep them there for a minute. Then, plunge both of them into a third bucket of lukewarm water at the same time. The water will feel hot to the hand that was in the cold water, and cold to the hand that was in the hot water. It's the exact same water, but your reality, your perception, is completely different.
But for a true masterclass in using the contrast principle, you have got to hear about this legendary letter a college student supposedly sent to her parents. She starts off by dropping a bombshell. There was a dorm fire, she had to jump out a window, she got a skull fracture and a concussion. I mean, can you imagine the sheer panic her parents are feeling reading this?
And then, after all that horror, she delivers the punchline. None of that actually happened. But hey, now that she has their attention, she wants to let them know she's getting a D in history and a C in chem. See what she did there? After setting up this terrible scenario of concussions and unplanned pregnancies, how bad can a couple of bad grades possibly seem? It is a brilliant, if maybe a little devious, use of contrast.
All right, on to the next one. And this one is a huge deal. It's probably one of the most powerful forces in our lives. Our deep, almost obsessive desire to be and to look consistent with what we've already done or said. Once we take a stand on something, we feel this enormous internal and external pressure to stick to it.
The toy industry has this down to a science. Check this out. Before Christmas, they go all out advertising some amazing must-have toy. Kids beg, parents promise, and that's the key. They make a commitment. But then, the company deliberately understocks the stores, so parents can't find it. They have to buy other gifts instead. Then, right after Christmas, the ads for that special toy start running again. The kids start whining. But you promised, you promised. And to stay consistent with that promise they made, the parents march right back to the store and buy the toy, boosting the company's January and February sales. It's ingenious.
This drive for consistency can lead to some really weird behavior. There's this story about a recruitment seminar where a logician in the audience just completely picked apart the presentation, finding all these flaws. You'd think everyone would just get up and leave, right? Nope. Instead, a bunch of them rushed to the front to sign up. This person's quote explains why. He was so desperate for a solution to his problems that he was afraid if he went home and thought about it, he'd never sign up. So he had to commit right then and there, locking himself into consistency before his rational brain could talk him out of it.
So why is this so powerful? Well, let's be honest. Being consistent is easy. It's a luxury. It's a shortcut that lets us off the hook. Once we've made a decision, we don't have to go through the hard work of thinking about that issue ever again. We can just hit play on our consistency tape and cruise. It's an easy path, but a really dangerous one.
Okay, so after hearing all this, you might be feeling a little, helpless. If these triggers are so automatic and so easy for other people to use, how do we even begin to protect ourselves? Well, the good news is we're not helpless. We just need to learn how to listen for the right signals, the internal alarms that tell us when we're being taken for a ride.
First things first, let's get this famous quote right. Ralph Waldo Emerson wasn't saying that consistency is bad. He was warning against a foolish consistency. The point isn't to be flaky or unreliable. The point is to avoid that blind, automatic, click-whir kind of compliance that gets us into trouble.
Your first signal is a physical one. You know that feeling, right? That little knot you get in the pit of your stomach when you realize you're being trapped? It's your gut screaming at you that you're about to agree to something you don't really want to do just to stay consistent with something you said or did earlier. The very first step is just to notice that feeling. Don't ignore it. The second signal is a little quieter. It's a whisper from what the book calls your heart of hearts. It's that first split-second flash of feeling you have about something before your logical brain kicks in and starts building all the reasons and justifications for your past decisions. The whole trick is to catch that initial flicker of emotion before you start explaining it away. And here is a fantastic tool to help you find that feeling. When you think you might be acting out of foolish consistency, just stop and ask yourself this one simple question. Knowing what I know right now, if I could go back in time, would I make the same choice? And don't overanalyze it. Just listen. Listen for that first flash of feeling. That's your honest answer right there.
In the end, your best defense is simply awareness. These automatic shortcuts, they aren't going anywhere. In fact, as the world gets more and more complicated, we're probably going to rely on them even more. The key is knowing when they're being turned against you. So the next time you feel that pressure, that little click, just take a second, pause, and listen. Are you hearing your mind building a case for consistency, or are you hearing your gut setting up a flare? Knowing the difference, that's how you take back control.